Welcome to Leading from Being with your hosts Marty Spiegelman and Todd Hoskins. Marty and Todd explore topics related to consciousness and leadership. Today they continue their series on climate consciousness, welcoming filmmaker, author, and luminary Hrund Gunnsteinsdóttir to discuss the Icelandic word bundle of InnSæi and how change begins from within. Stick around for From the Edge with Marty on journeying from the edge and a conscious rant from Todd on clearing the lot. Get show notes and much more at leadingfrombeing.com.
My name's Marty Spiegelman, and I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Todd Hoskins. Hey, Todd, it's good to be with you again.
Hi, Marty, and hello to all of our listeners. We're excited to continue our new series on climate consciousness today. Marty, why don't you lead us into a discussion and introduce our special guest?
All right, will do. Thank you, Todd. So, first of all, through all of our Leading from Being discussions, Todd and I have been exploring the nature of consciousness. And we've explored the nature of the world we live in, humanity's role in the big scheme of all these things. We've been exploring the distinctions between our human ways of being and doing in particular. And we've explored the profound impact that our Western ways of doing things are having on business and governance and well-being, and also the impact we're having on the natural environment that we depend on. So if you've been following us and others who speak to these same issues, you probably, like we do, feel a very deep sense that there's still something we haven't pinpointed, something still to awaken in the human heart and soul that would connect everything, that would spark our ability to make new sense of everything and move ahead the way we long to, which is collectively manifesting one dream of well-being for the whole planet, one dream that supports our diversity instead of destroying it, that weaves us back into the natural world and the way it speaks to us, in particular for this discussion, through the dynamics of climate. So if I were to imagine one person who embodied everything Todd and I dream of communicating through these dialogues, one magnificent person whose life mission is to connect people into the essence of being human and at the same time to the world around them, I would imagine our guest today, my very, very good friend and colleague, Hrund Gunnsteinsdóttir. Hrund is an Icelandic author. She's a speaker, a filmmaker, and a sustainability leader. And as she says of herself, a firm believer that change starts from within, Hrund brings this vital insight to her global work in sustainable business, post-conflict reconstruction and development, filmmaking, and the arts. She's also an advisory council member at Yale's International Leadership Center. She's a board member of Eirir Invest and Nordic Ignite Angel Ambassador. She's recognized for her work as a Yale World Fellow, a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader and Cultural Leader, and she's also an Icelandic Ocean Cluster's Sustainability Leader. And these are just a few of the things that she's known for. As Hrund says in her new book titled InnSæi, never before have we needed the human superpowers of creativity, empathy, tolerance, and open-mindedness so much. These superpowers are threatened by our modern overemphasis on rational thinking, algorithms, the way we constantly are bombarded with information, distraction and insecurities, and the increasing levels of burnout, anxiety, and stress. Our greatest hope for a bright tomorrow lies in shifting the center of gravity by reconnecting within to other beings and to the natural world. Her book, InnSæi, is not only core to our discussion today, it lies at the heart of the magic and power of Hrund's beautiful work in the world. So Hrund, welcome to Leading from Being.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Marty and Todd. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be with you here today. Thank you for the generous introduction, Marty.
I think a wonderful way to start our conversation today You and I have been sharing this term InnSæi. You taught that to me many years ago. But I would like for you to speak to our audience about that beautiful Icelandic word. Tell us what it means and how it's led you into the work that you do.
InnSæi is the Icelandic word for intuition. For many, many years, and speaking to many people from different parts of the world, I realized that, first of all, there are many ways that we define intuition. And I also realized that actually the Icelandic word InnSæi captures many of the different threads that we are using to define it, and puts it into this beautiful word bundle that I learned from one of your podcasts. So InnSæi is composed of two words. One is in, the first part, which means inside or into. And the second one is sæi. And sæi implies the ocean, the sea, or to sea. So the way that I write about and talk about and work with and understand InnSæi is to say, InnSæi is the sea within us. So it's this constantly moving, dynamic ocean of information and connections and sensations. And it's a world beyond the spoken word as well. So it's the world of imagination and feeling and creativity. And secondly, the word also means to see within. So it means to see inside yourself, to know how to witness yourself, or just to consciously witness yourself, how you show up in the world, to recognize who you are and set your boundaries and recognize your fears and biases and ideas, and so that you are better able to put yourself into other people's shoes. And then the third part of InnSæi is to see from the inside out. And this part is also something that's, I think, is very, very powerful. So it relates to our inner compass. And it means that from the inside out, you're able to carve your own way in a world that's characterized by uncertainty. And actually, you taught me that the ocean is the oldest metaphor for consciousness. And when we think about seeing from the inside out and navigating our own way in the world today, which often feels very chaotic and we really don't know what's up and down, if we think about the world we live in like an ocean, whether it's inside us or around us, rule number one is keep your head up so that you don't drown. And then rule number two is decide which way you want to go. And that's a very challenging part for most of us. It's, on the one hand, there are many options to choose from, which is fabulous. On the other hand, there's also so much distraction and stimuli and speed that's constantly hijacking our attention. I mean, it's even, we have $1 trillion business models that are engineered to hijack our attention, which is already a very scarce resource, but our most important resource to connect within, to InnSæi, to be aligned to it.
The theme that we have for these few Leading from Being sessions is climate consciousness. And I think what struck both Todd and me about your work is that you're speaking about a very old human understanding that when we go inside ourselves to get to know ourselves, we find our connection into the world at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, I think you have a very deep sense of that, because it can't be just me or just the world. If we're really conscious, then we find both at once. Yeah, I'm wondering what kind of challenges or discoveries you've made about people in the modern world and this challenge of finding themselves and the world at the same time.
Yeah, and thank you and for elaborating it so well. I mean, so definitely this is like, if there's anything that we humans know in our hearts, in our human spirit, it's the universal chord, the tone that is so energizing to be aligned with, in a way, and I'm born in Iceland, raised up in Iceland, and my dream was always to work for the United Nations or the Red Cross, and my passion was to make the world a better place. And very fast, one thing led to another. I was very young when I was leading one of the smaller UN agencies in a post-conflict setting in Kosovo in the Balkans just after the war. And it really was my dream job in so many ways. And I worked there for a while, and it was a very challenging time. It was also a time that I hold very dearly in my heart because it was one of the best years I've had. So I was, I think I was 27 or 8 when I went to Kosovo to work, to lead that agency. And so I worked there for a while, and then one thing led to another. I took this international competitive examination to become a permanent employee with the United Nations, and I got a job in Geneva right after Kosovo. I moved to Geneva. I have an office in the Palais des Nations, the Palace of Nations in Geneva in Switzerland, for those of you who have visited there. And I was embarking on a future career with the United Nations when I guess a few things came together in my life, and I realized that I had started to daydream, like really thinking while I was supposed to be focusing on work, I was thinking about what I should do when I would retire. And I had calculated that because I was so young when I started, I could possibly retire at 55. And then I'll start writing, and then I want to do something, work with people, creative ideas, and really connect again with people on the planet. Because I felt that while I was there, it was so bureaucratic and hierarchical. I really felt that we were serving a system instead of systems serving people on the planet. I also went through some really tough times in my personal life. I had this baggage from my Kosovo time, because when I was working in Kosovo, I wasn't mature enough to set my own boundaries in a very, very traumatized work environment and society. And so I hit a wall before in my late 20s. Now we use the word burnout. I didn't know it at the time. And so I really hit a wall, and I went into darkness. I couldn't see a way out. And when I started to see the way out, one of my biggest decisions in my life was to resign from a permanent position with the UN. And on my last day at the United Nations in Geneva, I promised myself that I would stay true to the ideals of the UN to make the world a better place. But from now on, I would have the courage to follow ideas that really stuck with me and make them a reality, no matter in what sector or area they would be. I would have the courage to do that. So since then, I've had close to 30 job titles in my life. But coming back to InnSæi, what I really realized was that I myself had become very disconnected from my InnSæi and my body. And so literally I had really serious problems in my back and my body. I at one point, traveling from Kosovo to Kazakhstan in the middle of the winter, I had a miscarriage, and I didn't even realize it at the time. I just thought I had really bad pain. I took painkillers and continued with my journey. So you can see this is disconnection. So I had become so disconnected from my soul, my InnSæi, my sense of belonging, my sparkle of hope and direction. And so I had to find my way back to me, home to me, back to my body, and make peace with myself first and foremost, and see a way forward. And so my process was to align with InnSæi, and I had to learn it from other people and books and old wisdom. And being the nerd I am, I just immersed myself in everything I could find. I did different trainings. I accepted different trainings. And yeah, so gradually I healed, and what was frozen inside me melted away. I could see clarity. And in that moment of clarity, I resigned from the UN. And one of the first things I did after this was to think like, okay, so I've gone through this experience. What would I have wanted to have learned to have been educated in order to prepare me for all this. And so one of my biggest projects after that was to design a university program based on what I had learned through all this experience. And after having done that, I embarked on doing a documentary film about this extraordinary, beautiful world within us, that if we immerse ourselves in it and understand it and start really caring for it and harnessing it for our greatest potential, the world just looks very different, and it looks really interconnected and whole, and it's not at all fragmented, and the world is not in silos, even if we often think about it that way, and everything is interconnected, and then, you know, the colors become stronger and starker, and your laughter is deeper, your sorrow is bigger and just more alive. That's a very long answer to your question, Mari.
It's a beautiful answer. And I love this for our listeners, for all of us, because what you're really saying is that our own individual journeys into ourselves is the answer.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And I think you're also saying it may be part of the modern human process to do so much. We're talking about being versus doing, to do so much that you slam into that wall.
Yeah.
And it bounces you into some other dimension where there's nothing but free fall until you find the beauty of the universe and your place in it. And
yeah.
Yeah. So you are a living embodiment of InnSæi.
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, I think that's a huge compliment, but I also want to say that, so like you said, it's a journey into ourselves. So in the context of sustainability and the crisis that we are faced with when it comes to the health of our planet, it's like the only way out is in, you know, we need to come from within. But I also want to say that I'm not always terribly jolly and connected to my InnSæi. So it's a continuous work. I always have to stay on my toes, you know, because I'm part of the world we
are
live in.
familiar with that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, because the ocean has rhythms and waves, and there's an up and a down. And I think as we help people understand their own InnSæi and their belonging here, that it's not a straight line, it's not a steady state.
I would love to go back to the compass. That really struck me. And I think about a lot of the people that I encounter in the world. They're looking for step-by-step directions. So if we imagine the world before MapQuest and then Google and Apple Maps, in order to get someplace, you needed to have a map of the territory and a compass. And now a lot of people who are going from point A to point B, they actually don't have a sense of place in where they are because they're used to relying on those step-by-step directions. And I think there's a metaphor there for what I hear both in the business world and at the individual level is tell me what to do.
Right.
And we hear this in the climate change conversations too, is tell me what to do. And there's a lot of messages out there about potential ways of doing it. But if we instead say the step-by-step directions don't get you to where you want to go or where we all need to go, it is the compass and the map. How do you help people find their compass?
Yeah. So yeah, this is a great question. So I believe there are actually many ways and methods to help people find their compass. And I think that when we are going really fast in our lives, we're fast-paced individuals, we want results right away and stuff. And if you are like that as a listener, you're about to get a little bit annoyed by what I'm going to say, because I think that in essence, some of the most important steps to sharpen our compasses are quite simple and they're subtle. So one way to think about it is with presence. So if you're a listener who's in the business environment, if you're a listener who is in the military or strategy, or if you're in the arts, or if you're just trying to take really good decisions in your work or private life, then presence is what you should focus on. So when you fill out your space that you are, your body, your presence, your being. When you're really present in yourself in the moment, you are best able to harness all of your intelligence, or as much of our intelligence as we possibly can, to take the best decisions. So let's say if you're very skilled in finance, for example, and you're doing a great job, you're skilled in finance or some kind of engineering technology or whatever it is that you are doing. If you're present in a moment where you are faced with something unexpected, which we need to be prepared for all the time now in the world we live in, then the more you are present in yourself, the better you're able to base your decisions and your reactions on your own experience, on the experience of others that you have learned, on everything you know intellectually. So there are many ways to approach being present. One of them is mindfulness, and we can start with downloading an app, or we can do like Mari once said, when you're in the shop, just you're buying something, you're holding what do you call it, the carrots, like where you
carrots
put the
or oranges,
carrots.
right?
Yeah. You're holding it and just hold it. Think about where your hands are. How does it feel to hold that in an item? What sounds are you hearing? Close your eyes for a second or keep them open. Take a deep breath. You're just aligning yourself to your inner compass. You are making sure that you are there. And this is what I mean by simplicity.
Yeah.
It's very complicated, but it's also very simple at the same time.
Yeah.
And in my personal experience, when I'm really stressed out and I'm going like, I have no time to lose living this life. I can, knowing everything I know about this, I can even get a little bit, oh my goodness, annoyed by stuff like that. But I think people are more and more realizing like, wow, this is exactly what I need to do.
Yeah.
So presence is something I would always start with, and try to understand that people around us actually love to see us being present, because this is our greatest gift that we can give to each other. That is good listening, and I'm here. I see you. I hear you.
And that's so beautiful, because in that moment we're connected again.
Yes.
So that presence coming to our own center, it's, if I can play with the metaphors here, we do often think about that compass, and there's that expression of finding true north and which way do I go. But it seems that the more we explore ourselves and the nature of being human, the answer isn't an outward direction, it's the center. It's being so present that, to your point about decision making and strategizing, all these things, what we need for the best decisions is real-time data, if you will. And if we're not present to this moment, we have different data, probably old data. Right?
Yes.
And you even use this beautiful phrase in the quote I took from your book about shifting the center of gravity by reconnecting within.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what you're saying is also maybe the ways we think about the world, the way we know the world via the directions, all these metaphors we have. Maybe we need to come back to the oldest metaphor for center, which is the heart of who we are.
Yes, exactly. And I think that, I think we're probably all familiar with that, to say like, be from the heart, connect the head to the heart, stuff like that, which is, there is so much wisdom in that. And I think that to write my book, I realized I needed to put this into one of the chapters, and that is basically a body scan, because InnSæi, intuition, is embodied. It's embodied knowledge. And when we understand how it works, it's also, maybe it's part of our responsibility to honor the fact that it is embodied in every single human being in the world. Mm-hmm. And the more we understand how the brain, how the body works, like you mentioned, the heart, it's our hearts communicate without us knowing that this is happening. They start to beat to the same rhythm. Yeah. The electromagnetic field around the heart is the biggest one in the human body. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, imagine the ripple effect of a loving heart. And then we think about the brain, and we have brain waves that connect in thin air. This is what recent science is showing us. And we, when a person walks into a room, that person has ripple effect on the energy in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And just because we can't take it in our hands and fold it together or measure it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So you also said something earlier that reminded me that also, because connecting with the heart and the rest of the body and picking up data points, did you say real-time information?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I love that term. So it's like when you're aware of how your whole body is sensing the environment. So our subconsciousness is informed by all of our body. It's like that's the intelligence we have. It's not just a small part of our brain. The more we are aware of this, the more we are receptive to the world around us. So being in the rhythm of InnSæi, shifting the center of gravity also means that we can't plan everything into detail. We are not in full control, and it's okay. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay to allow the world to come to us, and it's such a gift. But many of us find it really hard because we are afraid to let go of control
Mm-hmm.
and trust in life and how the day will unfold.
I have an example from yesterday. I did not know this beforehand, but I had an agenda with the conversation. There was something that I thought needed to take place in this conversation. So as the conversation was unfolding, without knowing, I am looking for the opportunity to get done what I wanted to get done in that conversation. But that opportunity was not really presenting itself. After 20 minutes or so, I realized I need to shift and let go of my agenda for this conversation, even though I was so convinced that that's what needed to happen in this conversation, that I picked up the phone and said, this needs to happen in order to move everything forward. I'm going to make it happen. How silly is that? Even though we have that certainty, we take that confidence into so many things we do. And then the 20 minutes in saying, I need to shift, I did not know what the shift needed to be, other than that I need to open up right now and be in a different state so that I can sense and move with what is being said and being spoken and adjust to the conversation and set my agenda aside.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great example. And do you think that you would have been aware of this is what you needed to do, like if you hadn't done all the work that you've done?
Absolutely not. I think like many of us, I grew up in a world believing that we need to find that point A, assess where we are. We need to determine our point B, where we need to go. And then we need to draw a straight line between A and B, put our heads down and go there. And the value in that as a successful human being or as a business strategist was in the ability to assess point A and assess point B and then plot the directions, the paths between them. But in reality, point A is always changing and point B is always changing. And the best pathways between them are dynamic and they're moving. And just being able to let go of that's the way that I'm programmed. That's the way I operate on a daily basis. There's a beautiful unraveling in that process because there is an accepting a different way of being that may come with a little bit of fear and the loss of control and perhaps even a little bit of confusion as to, well, if this isn't what we're doing, what are we doing? In my case, I started to really feel in my body, just like you said, Hrund, in my body that I am being held by something much greater than me, that it's not up to me to figure out what's best in every moment, that I'm participating in life. And all I need to do is be present, open my awareness, and respond to what life is bringing. And I make that sound a lot easier than it is. It's actually taking quite a bit of time, but there's a freedom and there's a joy in sailing or surfing or that moving with the elements that is a much richer and more fulfilling and exciting life, with better outcomes too, by the way.
Yeah, no,
Much
this is beautiful.
Yeah. And I think the momentary sense of loss of control and fear and all that stuff, it's relative to the thing we're trying to let go. It's not relative to what we're moving into. And so what I'm hearing, what we're talking about is shifting from a kind of separation, which can only be held via control, giving up that separation in order to experience participation. And Todd, you just used that word, participation.
Yes.
So there's
Yes.
a momentary passage that is maybe disorienting and might be scary and all that stuff. But the world, what is the climate saying to us? But you guys have not been participating.
Yes.
And if we could find the center of ourselves and in that discovery experience that we are connected and the world is guiding us and informing us, I think a lot of the terrible, huge scale problems we are facing would start to dissolve because human participation would begin to change. Human participation would increase and grow, and that changes everything.
Yes, exactly. And a field of sustainability, sustainable businesses and responsible corporations, it's the word climate often shrinks and puts into silos something that is complex, not just complicated. So it's like we've been very focused on climate and climate change, which is hugely important, and it's all over. But the way we've often approached it is through a very tunnel viewed way. So in a way that we just forget about everything that's around it. So, for example, those of us who've been thinking about this for many, many years, we also celebrate it. And we've been celebrating the fact that we are now talking more about biodiversity and the circular economy. So most countries in let's say, in industrialized countries or whatever we should call them are like between 4 and 8% circular economies. The rest is linear. So buy, use, and throw away. So which is really, really bad, and part of the reason why we're in such a bad state when it comes to the planet. But the more we come to realize that, planet Earth is asking us to understand the interconnectivity of everything there is, the ecosystem of planet, natural ecosystems, and also of people, the more we get what it is that we need to be doing. Because the way that we've approached so many things is by thinking it's complicated. So let's use the metaphor of a car and the Amazon rainforest. So you have a car, it's complicated. It's put together of many different parts, large and small. But you can take it apart into bits and pieces, and then you can put it back together again. You can assemble it back together, and it will work as before. This is how we've been approaching lots of things in our lives and societies and economies. But something that's complex like the rainforest is, or natural ecosystems, or let's say also human societies, you can't just take them apart to their original pieces and think you can put them back together again and make them work as before. You can't. So you have to let go of that thinking. And so I think that, because by taking something apart from an ecosystem, it will create ripple effects or butterfly effects with unforeseen consequences. And I think that is what climate is saying. Climate, as the face of the natural world, is telling us today. It's like, you can't take me out of context, guys. You're standing on me. You're breathing my air. Like, what you do comes back to you. So it's so almost in a philosophical, but maybe not so philosophical way. It's the world around us when it comes to the state of the planet. I mean, the planet has its own boundaries. They have been defined as 9 boundaries, planetary boundaries, by the Stockholm Resilience Center. We have crossed 6 of these 9 planetary boundaries. And what this means in just regular language is that planet Earth is losing its ability to renew its energy. And it's because of man-made culture, consumption patterns, and how we take things out of context. And then we can put that together. We can use that metaphor in ourselves and think we also have our boundaries. How good are we in protecting our own or nourishing or taking care of our own boundaries so that we don't burn out, we don't become zombies in our own lives, all these similarities, we've lost that big context. And some people would say that the health, our own mental, physical health, is a reflection of a bigger problem, or vice versa, because the cosmos is also within us, as Carl Sagan once said.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful, profound way of saying what is so these days, Hrund. I think you just shifted my center of gravity. That was really, really profound.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think also what you're saying is this principle InnSæi, if we can find that within ourselves, if we can ignite that, if we can realize we have this fundamental capacity to know the world and be known by the world, even if we had a percentage of humans find this, that the truth of what you just shared with us, it becomes known. We just know it instantly.
Yes, it becomes innate to us to understand how everything is interconnected.
Cannot just take things apart and expect to be able to put them back together. Todd, last week, I think you were talking about the problem with the mechanistic view of the planet and even of ourselves. We kind of in medicine believe we can take people apart and put them back together, but that's not the way it works.
I don't know what you guys think, but I feel like the medical world, the world of education, our health systems, those very conventional systems, I think they are gradually accepting more and more how everything is interconnected.
What is being called the new sciences are really the evolution of the current sciences that are in a messy in-between of looking at the world from the Newtonian way of cause and effect, that everything is like a machine, that it's complicated rather than complex. And if you look across fields, whether it's psychology or biology or sociology or even hard sciences, on the leading edge, there are these people saying there's a different way of seeing and a different way of knowing, and this is part of it too. It actually came up in our episode 27 about two-eyed seeing, how there are a lot of scientific pairings now between traditional ecological knowledge or indigenous ways of knowing and what we've known as modern science. That is kind of the leading edge, and it's been happening for 100 years. That's how long that this evolution has been underway. But we're just now starting to feel the impacts of that, both the negative impacts of not seeing the fullness and complexity of what life is, and then the positive impacts of there's new frontiers within biology right now because of different ways of understanding how our bodies work.
Yeah. I always think of this as in human behavior, it took us 2000 and a few years to turn off our access to our own InnSæi. But these things that are arising now, that are visible now, I always think that consciousness is always on the move, and it is always evolving, and it will evolve through any human being that even has a crack of an opening. And I think that consciousness shifts things back to life positive momentums faster than we destroy it. So I think we're seeing a lot of things rise up, and I think that the more we focus, seek out, like Todd is describing, seek out what is happening that is good, the better off we are. Thinking about this for you, Hrund, in your work, the two rhythms of being and doing, and you talk about the if InnSæi, if we say loosely that it's intuition, but we also have this faculty of imagination, and we have to pay attention to what we pay attention to, if I could say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
How does InnSæi, in your view, working with people, how does InnSæi help people find the life positive energies to focus on? How do we start to recognize that life positive and make that our attention and the food for our imagination?
Yeah, that's a great question. So InnSæi intuition is always there. It's within us. It doesn't kick or scream when we don't listen. It may try to reach us through our bodies breaking down or whatever, but it's always there. So when we activate it, for my head, for the way I think, what really makes sense is to think like we turn the lights on and there's movement going on, and we are practicing that muscle of paying attention to what we pay attention to. That's actually, I think, the holy grail in both creativity and connecting within ourselves. When we have a balance between the receiving and giving, and the analytical and the creative, and the logical and the intuitive, we are better able to ensure that circulation system of the soul is all set in place. And I believe that when that happens, we become more alive. We don't just merely exist. And so when we become more alive, we're able to see the different colors around us, and that we may see them in different lights, like we discussed before. And we may even, more often than we used to, experience this feeling of a sense of awe. Research on a sense of awe is relatively new, as I understand it. It's like 10 to 12 years old in a sort of like a very rigorous and published way to study awe. But what happens when we experience a sense of awe, even if it's just for like half an hour in a week or twice in a week, then the effect that it has on our minds and hearts and bodies and the way that we perceive the world is that we show more interest. We become generally more interested in the world around us and other people. Our nervous system calms down. Our minds open up. We become more creative, focused, curious. Mm-hmm. We basically become happier and nicer people. And what I also find very interesting, according to research, is that we care less about material things and more about the planet. We think more we instead of I. So it shifts our focus away from perhaps ourselves or our closest environment, but to something bigger. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what happens when we align to and harness and practice our InnSæi. And then you had you mentioned imagination. So I think that one of the most precious skills that we can have today is imagination. And I'm going to try to say this in not too long sentences, but when we are able to imagine a flourishing, beautiful future for us and coming generations, we are more likely to be able to reach that outcome in the world that we live in today. Imagination is not the same as fantasy. So fantasy can be something that we are trying to escape reality. We're fantasizing about something that has no ground in anything around us. And it's okay often to go into fantasy. Don't get me wrong, we need it. It's almost like medicine. But imagination is actually something that I think is very practical in the world today, because we are in so dire need to do things differently. So imagination is often something that's actually processed over a long period of time. The more we are aware of how we are picking up information and noticing things around us, we are building up our imagination for what could be. So we are less afraid to go into the unknown. Our creativity and logical skills become more harnessed towards reaching that, what our imagination is telling us is a realistic vision for what could be. So if we think about doing something that's based on old knowledge and old ways of doing this, it will create the same outcome. The world, our planet, and people are calling for a more eco-centric, not eco, but ecologically centric vision. Then the more we are able to visualize that, the more we should be courageous to go into the unknown and follow step by step, even if the outcome of each day and each meeting is different from what we expected, because we can't know exactly how it's going to turn out, because we're in the middle of a creative process. And I think the world is going through a transition in that sense. In the world today, it's characterized by uncertainty. So that's why I think imagination is so important, and that we should actually take it very seriously, because imagination is often something that we've thought about really carefully. And that's what our goal to reach the circular economy is about. People visualize how it would look like if our economies weren't just linear. You know, if there was a balance between wilderness and what we call civilizations and so on and so forth.
That's beautiful. What I just heard you say is that, see if I'm hearing you correctly, Hrund, I just experienced listening to you that if I can even just touch my own InnSæi, I am shifted into being. And the whole wrestle with doing, being, it's gone.
Yes.
Because being is the center of everything. And that turns on the faculty of imagination and everything else that we're seeking.
Yes. So being is also active. It requires our agencies.
I have a feeling we could keep going a while longer, but we're time bound. We don't. It's time for our special segments. Marty, you're up first. Why don't you take us to the edge?
All right.
From the edge.
Today, I'd like us to imagine the edge as a principle, as an energy dynamic that brings new horizons into view. And even more than that, when we meet ourselves as we are, like we're talking about today, this principle of the edge begins to create new horizons. And these horizons are the new beginnings that we're seeking for ourselves as we learn to be fully who we can be. So just for now, at least, let's put aside our idea of edge as an ending, like the cliff edge marks the end of the land we're standing on, right? And let's put aside our idea of edge as a limit, like believing we're at the edge of our capacity to do more of something. And for today, let's have edge become our driving force, propelling us toward new horizons. For today, let's imagine that we are the new generation of wayfinders, the ones seeking amazing horizons of greater potential, greater thriving, and embodying Hrund's beautiful teachings about InnSæi, which is our ability to see outwardly from that inner source we all have. Let's move ahead right now and do some exploring. So if we're going to go on a new journey, like I'm suggesting, I think we should know something about who we are before we start out. Because the minute we're truly out there in the world is going to speak to us. And if we don't know at least a little something about who we are, how are we going to know who the world's talking to? And we don't want to miss it, right? So first, we have to be wayfinders of our own hearts. We have to shine our light inward to see ourselves first. But, here's another warning. It's not a linear experience. Because when you find yourself in the very same moment you find the world and your place in it, and you discover the ways the world is already speaking to you because it already knows you. And these are just some of the crazy, beautiful things about being fully alive. So we ought to get used to them. Now, there's one more thing before we start this journey I have planned. We'll need a timeless human technology for our little expedition. And it's what we've just been calling imagination. But sometimes we call it the voice of the ancestors. Sometimes we call it intuition. Sometimes we call it the speech of the universe. It doesn't really matter what we call it today, because in a moment, we're going to be listening to the harmonies of consciousness itself, harmonies expressed through the human heart into what we call poetry these days. We'll be listening to the voices of spirit and nature and lineages that will stir your memory banks and hopefully reflect back to you your own true nature. So as we travel together for these next few minutes, remember, descriptions, definitions don't matter. The only thing that matters is our direct sensing experience and the knowledge we might gain from that sensing. As you dive into the beauty I'm about to share with you, let the principle of the edge propel you across a new horizon, a vibrant leading edge of a new world for yourself and those you serve in this amazing life. Let it ignite your sense of self as well as that new territory. Now remember, experience the words, don't think them. Pay attention to what comes into your awareness. Sense yourself and your new horizon, and let the edge be your new power. So, starting out on this little journey, let's experience something about energy, matter, and the nature of our world. This is a little piece of wisdom from Rumi. If love did not live in matter, how would any place have any hold on anyone? Are you feeling a little bit of new territory under your feet now? Yeah? All right, now we're out in the world, we're out in the universe, we're seeking that new horizon in ourselves, and we need to know a little bit about the larger powers that speak us into being, as the elders say. So again, a little bit from the poet Rumi. Rain fell on one man, he ran into his house. But the swan spread its wings and said, pour more on me of that power I was fashioned from. As you move from the center of yourself out into the world, can you feel the powers that you are fashioned from? Can you become that? Yeah. Okay, well, we're well into our journey and we're feeling a little bit of new stuff, but we're still human and we live in the modern world. So here's one more piece from Rumi that we have to really remember. He says to us, even about himself as well as us, he says, my ego is stubborn, often drunk, impolite. Am I loving, finely sensitive, impatient, confused? Please take messages from one to the other. So remember that about yourselves as we continue our journey. Be kind to yourself. And let's consider what it might be like to be found as ourselves out in the world. And here's the Northwest Indian teaching story from David Wagoner. A child asks, what do I do when I'm lost in the forest, when I don't know where I am in this life? And here's what the elder says. Stand still. The trees ahead and bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here. And you must treat it as a powerful stranger. You must ask permission to know it and be known. Listen. The forest breathes. It whispers, I have made this place around you. If you leave it, you may come back again saying, here. No two trees are the same to raven, and no two branches are the same to wren. If what a tree or a branch does is lost on you, then you are surely lost. So stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. So by now in our journey, we might be getting a sense that all our efforting is kind of pointless because the universe already knows us and is attempting to find us. And if we just take a breath, we might get a new sense of ourselves. And here's another little piece from Rumi to help us imagine what that might be. And Rumi says, imagine you're gliding from the edge of a cliff like an eagle. Imagine you're walking like the tiger walks by himself through the forest. You're most handsome when you're after food. Spend less time with nightingales and peacocks. One's just a voice, the other just a color. Now, the last piece of wisdom on our journey, having crossed one of those horizons, driven by our new power called the edge, we might have arrived somewhere, but our inner doubter could still have some juice left. So pay attention to our final message from Juan Ramon Jimenez. Carry this in your heart forever. He says, I have a feeling that my boat has struck down there in the depths against a great thing. And nothing happens. Nothing. Silence. Waves. Well, nothing happens? Or has everything happened? And I'm standing now quietly in my new life.
Marty, you took us on a journey from the edge.
I did.
You sure did.
Into new territory, as Hrund did for us today. Yeah. So, Todd, I think you have a beautiful rant for us.
Conscious rant.
If you're one of the millions of people who like to look at real estate online, you know that when exploring so-called vacant land, you will often see the phrase building site cleared. First, let me make the point, the land is not vacant at all. It's been alive and likely doing pretty well since before there were humans around. It's highly occupied. But my rant today is not about vacant land. It's on the human tendency of wiping everything out to make a space for ourselves, clearing the lot. Why is it that we bring in bulldozers and clear spaces for ourselves? Is it because we don't like listening to the land, knowing what needs to stay and what can be removed without harming the ecosystem? Is it because we fear there won't be enough space for the size of home we want to build? Or is it because it's just simpler to declare, this is mine, this is our space, and we don't want anything infringing upon it? Granted, sometimes old trees need to be removed, some may endanger a house or a roof, but we don't need to wipe clean square meters to live peacefully. I truly hate when trees are removed with no consideration. It hurts me. But this also feels like a metaphor for how some humans have treated our occupancy on this planet. Listen to this. Our business is not involved in the environment. Climate change is irrelevant to what we do. This is clearing the lot, saying we have our territory and somehow it's separate from the living, breathing planet we live upon. It's not. Any business, any organization intersects with climate. It intersects with life. This is all of our business. Or organizations deny the vendors they use, the state of the communities where they work, or the deals as not relevant to the social contract they have as an organization. You see, we continue to create these imaginary islands, or better yet, these massive developments where the bulldozers have been brought in and the impacts ignored. We pretend trees are barriers and anything not relevant to core mission or profitability is unimportant. So what would I propose instead? When you want to build on a lot, when there's a piece of land that you love, walk the perimeter again and again. Weave inside, know the trees, let the land communicate with you. Know your environment and resist the urge to separate, claim, and make it too simple. Here in Costa Rica, close to the Liberia airport, there's a German restaurant with an amazing bakery. They have built their outdoor seating around a mother guanacaste tree, at least 100 years old. It's giant and it rises up right from behind the bar. Every time people eat Spätzle or have a Dortmunder, they are beneath the tree. And I'm guessing they are happier than they think because the restaurant was built around the tree. So metaphorically, building around the tree means we don't ignore the intangibles or dismiss the impacts of our decisions and actions as irrelevant. It's all relevant. And when you are tapping into InnSæi or in full consciousness, you don't have to work so hard. You can just be in the environment and know it and respond, and we'll all be in better shape.
Oh, how beautiful, Todd. I feel like my center of gravity has been shifted again and deepened. It's absolutely wonderful. Thank you for that.
It's beautiful from both of you. Amazing.
It's time for takeaways. Marty, you're first.
Takeaways.
I have about 10 of them, so I'll try to pick two. It's been so marvelous, Hrund, speaking with you. The things that really struck me, the two I'm going to try to pick are the way that you have used that phrase to shift our center of gravity back to the center of us, to shift it within. You can feel that, and I think if people can simply feel that, then we've made an amazing, beautiful, heartfelt impact today. The other thing that really struck me was when you were speaking about the 9 planetary boundaries and suggested that our bodies have those boundaries because we are a microcosm of the planet, the universe itself. That's such a beautiful way to see ourselves and take care of ourselves as part of the whole instead of separate. So I really want to thank you for that. So those will be my 2 takeaways for the moment. Todd, how about you?
We've talked about maps and compasses and wayfinding and journeys today, and what that brought up for me was old maps, the type that on the margins or in the ocean, they said, "Here be dragons," with drawings of magnificent creatures no one has ever seen but feared. And in a way, they were saying that which is undiscovered or unknown is monstrous, is dragon-like, is that to be feared. And I think with today's conversation, in those margins, the land of the unknown or the oceans of the unknown, it should say instead, "Here be the soul's circulatory system." That the unknown is full of life, and it's the edge we all want to move from.
Oh, wow. Wow. Once
Wow,
again,
it's beautiful.
rearranged. Beautiful.
Hrund, you have a takeaway for us?
Wow, do I have a takeaway? How do I choose? First of all, you've both expanded my horizons, and you've also helped me sharpen my core, my inner compass through this. So I think that taking from both of you, expanding our horizons and understanding that it's okay to go to the edge, or maybe we are at the edge, or to think about the urgency of the importance of being fully alive. And also what you just said now, Todd, about when we are aligned with InnSæi, life unfolds and it actually becomes easier in a way. So it's so I guess what I would also add to this is how worth everything it is to keep our hearts open as we wayfind and navigate, because it will be a defining factor, I think, for what we can expect to find in ourselves and others.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Hrund.
Thank you, Corinne.
Magnificent. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, this was so much fun. Let's do it again after the book comes out.
Oh, that'll be lovely. I'd love that.
Yes, let's do that. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. And again, the book is named InnSæi. And when this episode is posted, you'll find Hrund's website and the spelling of InnSæi and the spelling of her beautiful Icelandic name. And you'll be able to get in touch with her via her website. So thank you so much, Hrund.
Thank you, Marti and Todd, so much for this wonderful time together and for everything you've given me through this conversation. I look forward to speaking with you again.
Fantastic.
And thank you to all of our listeners. We hope you stick around for the next episode in this series on climate consciousness.
Yes, until next time. Thanks, everybody.
You came up from the ground, from a million little pieces. You're a pretty human being. Yeah, you're a pretty human being. When it all comes crashing down, you try to understand your meaning. No one said it would be easy. This living it ain't easy. And you were sewn together with a tapestry of molecules, a billion baby galaxies and wide open spaces. And everything you need is here, everything you fear is here, and it's holding you up, it just keeps holding you up.
Thank you for listening to Leading from Being. You can learn more at leadingfrombeing.com, including contact information for Marti and Todd. Our theme song is courtesy of Cloud Cult.